So you might have seen the rough sleeper figures being reported in the press over the last couple of weeks. I've been really busy, but I wanted to do a video about it just to update a few things I did in the video from last year. And part of the reason I want to do a video about all this stuff is that you are not going to see any kind of intelligent analysis in the sector otherwise, it seems. I've seen a number of charities mention it in their social media posts, but it all seems to be geared towards basically appeal for funding, where essentially they're saying, you know, we're really good at ending homelessness, so give us your money and we'll end the homelessness, despite the fact the rough sleeper numbers are worse than ever. You probably tell I'm a little bit frustrated about all that, because I have not seen a single social media post that did not mention money. So there's no kind of analysis of what's actually happening and what might this mean in terms of ending homelessness. And for me, there is some really good news within these figures, which I'll go through, which are kind of hidden away and I don't see other people talking about it. So you might have seen a video I did about 6 months ago about this, where I tracked the number of single people in temporary accommodation and how that correlated with the number of UK nationals who are rough sleeping. Now both of those are proxies, because the way the figures are collated, it doesn't actually break them down into the number of people with recourse to public funds and those without. And the reason I'm interested in those with recourse is that if you have recourse, it's likely that the council will have a duty to house you. It's likely you're going to be in priority needs. And if you have recourse, you're eligible. Obviously, you're homeless because you're rough sleeping. And so there is at least going to be a short-term duty to house you. And as you see me talk about in other videos, it's actually quite difficult to be intentionally homeless. So you basically got a group of people who are very likely going to be in priority needs, may well not be intentionally homeless, therefore should be owed the main duty. And yet what we're seeing across the country, and the charity sector is absolutely complicit in this, it seems, certainly a lot of charities anyway, and essentially they let councils get away with saying that rough sleepers are not in priority need, which just makes my blood boil. But anyway, so yet again these figures show that the more single people you've got in TA, the less people rough sleeping there'll be. And to kind of show this, if I show this first graph here, we've got the orange line here is the number of single people in temporary accommodation in the whole of England, which has gone up since 2016 from about 15 and a bit thousand up to 45,000, so it's basically tripled. And the number of UK nationals who are rough sleeping has gone down from 3,200, kind of went right down in COVID, and it's kind of bounced back up to 2,500-ish or so now. On this graph here, you're not going to see particularly close correlation yet. However, if you multiply the number of rough sleepers by a factor of 8, you get this nice green line here. And if you can imagine a line which basically dissects the two, a kind of a gradually increasing line, which basically represents the total number of people in the system is gradually increasing, what we see here is a very, very beautiful correlation. As TA numbers go up, rough sleeping numbers go down and vice versa. And this shows to me that if you want to end rough sleeping, you focus on getting people into temporary accommodation, single people into temporary accommodation. Now, you might ask, why is it a factor of 8? I don't know why it's 8 exactly, but essentially what this is saying is that for every 8 single people who are homeless on a typical night, one of them will fall through the cracks and end up rough sleeping, because many of the people who are single homeless will basically be sofa surfing. They'll basically be staying in, you know, inadequate accommodation, but they won't yet be rough sleeping. And in effect, if you want to bring rough sleeping numbers down, you need to have this safety net working and basically act as a preventative measure that are catching people who become homeless as single homeless people, therefore they're not automatically in priority needs. But basically, by putting them into temporary accommodation, you're going to stop them actually rough sleeping, as well as obviously those who are already rough sleeping, about getting them into temporary accommodation. So if you're serious about bringing rough sleeping numbers down in your area, you just need to focus on getting those single homeless people making effective homeless applications, making sure they're assessed properly, making sure priority need decisions are right, making sure intentional decisions are right, and you're going to find that rough sleeping numbers will come down. Now, I'll talk about Bedford. Obviously talk about Bedford a lot because it's where I'm from. I kind of have a lot of knowledge about the area and how it's worked over the years. And back in 2008, actually, we had the second highest number of rough sleepers in the country. Not because we actually did it, it's just because back then no one wanted to count rough sleepers, so a lot of areas just basically downplayed it, whereas actually we gave an accurate number. And in Bedford, I've talked many times elsewhere, it's kind of, you know, big news for us here. The number of single people in temporary accommodation has just rocketed up. And actually since 2013, it's actually gone up by 6,500% now. So it was about 10 back in 2013. The latest figures are 673. Again, these are all taken from government stats. And on this graph here, which goes back to 2016, we have this increase from 24 single homeless people in 2016 in TA up to 673 now. And we've seen rough sleeper numbers basically go from, I think the highest number was like 47 UK nationals with who are rough sleeping. And it's basically now single figures. It was 0 in 2022. You might ask, well, hang on a minute, Mike, if what you're saying is correct and you've had this massive increase in single people in TA in Bedford, why is rough sleeper numbers not zero? It's a really good question, and actually there is a warning within it for any council who's looking to do this, because what's happened in Bedford is, back in 2017 at some point, they basically made a decision to try and follow the law as best they can. I've talked about why that is elsewhere, but crucially, they did not declare the fact that they had previously been gatekeeping, they had previously been given perverse non-priority decisions and so on. And so I remember it well, being in various settings in Bedford Homeless Partnership being an example, where the number of people in TA was reported on every meeting, and everyone was kind of like, oh, it's just going up and up and up. And supported accommodation providers were also reporting that they had lots of voids, and effectively it was a big concern for them because they were losing a lot of money. And it was not said explicitly within those meetings, yeah, the reason you got voids is because actually there's loads of single people in TA now. We're basically taking people in when we should do, and actually many of those are getting housed. And so because there wasn't that honest dialogue in the meetings, a lot of the supported accommodation providers, basically they had these voids, they needed them filled in order to maximise their income, so they started taking people from further and further afield. So they kind of basically dropped their local connection criteria on their supported accommodation, and that has essentially led to Bedford being a bit of a honey trap for people who are homeless. Just last week, someone from Central Beds, someone from Leighton Buzzard contacted me, basically saying that they'd approached various services in Central Beds and didn't get any help, and they were basically told to apply for hostel accommodation in Bedford. Now, Leighton Buzzard is about 20 miles away, it's not local, it's not easy to get to either actually if you're homeless, because there's no bus routes or anything like that, but that is a common theme that we've seen developing over this time. And essentially because the supported accommodation providers have continued to be on this kind of money train, so to speak, if you want to be cynical, they've basically been importing people in from surrounding areas, making it very easy for Central Beds essentially to not kind of do their bits, what they should be doing. And it's kind of led people to arrive in Bedford, you know, they might get evicted from supported accommodation, end up rough sleeping. So we've always kind of got this number of people who are rough sleeping. I'd actually be really interested to know where those people who are rough sleeping have actually come from. Have they been in Bedford long term, or have they come to Bedford more recently through the supported accommodation, you know, kind of avenue? So that's, as I say, hopefully that's all, well, I find it interesting anyway, I really do. For me, the big picture thing is that if you want to reduce rough sleeping in your area, you need to focus all your efforts on getting the council to follow the law to single homeless people, not just those who are rough sleeping, although definitely those people who are rough sleeping, but those who are single homeless, they're not rough sleeping yet, but they're obviously at risk of rough sleeping, because if you get them housed and kind of get them out of the system as soon as possible, obviously they're not going to end up rough sleeping down the line. And for me, the beauty of this is that you don't have to wait for funding, you don't have to wait for permission from central government or MHCLG to do like a big announcement or something like that. If you've worked in the sector as long as I have, you'll know how many times the government has promised to end rough sleeping, and basically it just comes to nothing. And if you're working in the sector now and you're believing naively those promises that come from central government, I'm afraid you're part of the problem. That's the bottom line. You need to get off your bum and basically start challenging the council now, and not waiting for some saviour to come along to basically kind of fix it all. Basically, the law is good. If you apply it fairly to people at risk of rough sleeping or people who are already rough sleeping, the majority will be housed. There will be a duty to house them. You can also challenge, obviously, the suitability of that temporary accommodation, because if they're being put into absolute dive accommodation, then that's not going to be setting them up to do well in life. You need to kind of challenge that as well. But what we can effectively do here is a small number of people in an area, if they apply this stuff consistently to the council, get lots of people housed, then actually they can turn around this rough sleeping trend of increasing numbers every year. And you don't have to wait for the council to kind of okay that. You can basically just proceed with the law as it is, because the law is pretty darn good, to be honest. So I don't know if that's interesting or not. I find it fascinating. There's probably a lot more to say about this, and again, I did a video about 8 months ago or something, which I went into examples around the country of how these stats work. I've obviously just focused on Bedford in this video, but I kind of gave different examples and just showed how the same correlation can be seen around the country. So yeah, forget what you've been told about the latest buzzwords and jargon and kind of, you know, things that are happening in the homeless sector. The latest buzzword seems to be systems thinking. So yeah, this is systems thinking, by the way. This is basically correlating two things which no one's noticing and realizing that has a real world impact. There's probably a lot more to say in terms of the definition of vulnerability. There's various videos on the channel where we talked about that. Me and Will Flack did a couple of videos at length looking at cases on that. There's another video called A Judge Explains Priority Need, which is Sarah Steinhardt, who's a deputy district judge and barrister, really good barrister, who explains vulnerability as well. Don't listen to this nonsense that comes from the sector, both councils and voluntary sector, who basically accept the idea that people who are rough sleeping are not in priority need. They almost certainly will be, because the very definition of priority need through vulnerability is essentially, is there some kind of impairment, which is one, impairing their ability to find accommodation, which by definition they will be because they're rough sleeping, and two, will kind of lead them to be at additional risk of harm if they were homeless. And you're comparing it against someone who is, in the words of the law, healthy, ordinary and robust. So when we see these kind of characteristics that are associated with rough sleeping, institutional backgrounds, trauma, mental health issues, physical health issues, no experience of managing a tenancy, no support network or very little support network, previous experience of sleeping rough, all those kind of things which you're going to see in that rough sleeping population, all of those things are going to be very relevant to them being in priority need. So I'm afraid if you are routinely seeing people who are rough sleeping being told they're not in priority need, then you need to do something about that. That's just basically the system's not working. The council's getting away with not housing people, and then effectively what we then get is this whole surrogate sector, which is basically just spending money not housing people. So forget all that stuff. Just get on with it. Individual cases. Start crunching through it. Start getting some changes in the local council, and you'll see those rough sleeping numbers coming down. So as always, if you've got questions about this, stick it in the comments. I'll take it to the next live stream. If you're interested in putting this stuff into practice, we do really good online training every sort of month or 2 months or so. £30 if you're coming in on your own back, £60 if you're coming in a professional capacity. It's got 4.9 stars on Trustpilot, which is actually quite difficult to achieve because you start with 7 3.5 star reviews. So we've had about 110 5-star reviews now, something like that, I can't remember. And so that course just basically takes you through the basic foundations of how the law works, so what the 5-part test is and how everything else fits together. And essentially what you can do is, if you've done that course, it kind of gives you that foundation to add in lots of information which you can then get from this channel, lots of other resources, but it just kind of helps people kind of realise that it's not this kind of deeply intricate labyrinth. Actually, it's fairly sensible, it makes sense, and if you just focus on making robust homeless applications properly, the way you should do, and basically focus on that definition of priority needs, you're going to find the majority of people will be owed some sort of duty to be housed, and for many people they'll get housed and they'll never become homeless again. It's really kind of effective way of kind of working, in my opinion. I'm absolutely certain that this is the way that we're going to bring homelessness down. We're not going to do it by waiting for the government. We're not going to do it by waiting for the big charities to kind of get around to it. You've got to remember that lots of charities have a vested interest in not fixing this stuff. And if you want to see that in the real world, then go see how charities don't challenge bad decisions from the council, and just ask why that's happening. Why are charities seeing their own clients being told there's no duty to house them when there really is and not pushing back?